Welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. As we get into episode 49 today, we're going to be talking about the spies that Moses sends into the promised land and then the subsequent rebellion of the people. We will be in Numbers 13 and 14, and with that, let's dive right in. Chapter 13, verse 1 says, "The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." Now, as we've already seen in multiple places, sometimes pictures are made more complete by other texts. This picture is made more complete by Deuteronomy 1:22 through 33. In fact, this whole story is recounted for us there, and we see that the people also wanted to send in some spies. Verse 3 says, "So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the commandment of the Lord, all of the men who were heads of the people of Israel. And these were their names: from the tribe of Reuben, Shemua, the son of Zachar, from the tribe of Simeon." Man, we're going to read names today. Golly, I should have been more prepared. Shaphat, the son of Hori, from the tribe of Judah. Caleb, this is going to be really significant, from the tribe of Jephunneh. From the tribe of Issachar, Igal, the son of Joseph. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun. This is going to be really important. And from the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, the son of Raphu. From the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, the son of Sodi. From the tribe of Joseph, that is from the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi, the son of Susi. From the tribe of Dan, Amiel, the son of Gamali. From the tribe of Asher, Sether, the son of Michael. And from the tribe of Naphtali, Nabdi, the son of Vashi. And from the tribe of Gad, Guel, the son of Maki. These were the names of the men whom Moses sent out, and Moses called Hosea, the son of Nun, Joshua. That's why that's important. Back in verse 8, Hosea, the son of Nun, is Joshua. Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, "Go up to the Negev, go up to the hill country, and see what the land is, and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether they're few or many, and whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they dwell in are camps or strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are trees in it or not. Be of good courage, bring some of the fruit of the land." Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin to Rehob, the Lebo Hamath, and they went up from the Negeb, the south country. They came from Hebron. They went through all these places. The descendants of the Anak were there. Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. And they came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down from there a branch with a single cluster of grapes. And they carried it on a pole between them, and they also brought some pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because the cluster of the people of Israel cut down from there the grapes. So, really quickly, this is just a funny aside. And I remember vividly the children's Bible that I had growing up, in part because I still have it. And it was a very thick, beautifully illustrated children's Bible. It was basically the whole Bible. It wasn't just pieces of it. But anyway, in this story, every time I've ever heard this story told as a kid, what they were saying, people were saying the grapes were the size of grapefruits, and that this one cluster of grapes was so big, and it was giant grapes the size. Nowhere in the Bible does this say that these were giant grapes. It's a big cluster of grapes. And if you've ever seen a cluster, like what we see at the supermarket, the little cluster that we buy isn't necessarily the whole of a cluster of grapes. And so nowhere does it say that these were giant grapes. Just keep that in mind. It was a giant cluster of grapes, which is a completely different thing. And does that matter for you or for me? Probably not for you, but for me a great deal, because I grew up thinking that these grapes were the size of grapefruits. And at one point, even the size of like bowling balls. Can you imagine, right? You know, people slicing off a little piece of grape for their kids or something. Anyway, I just think it's ridiculous. And so now you know too. How long did they spy out the land? Look at verse 25 here. At the end of 40 days, they came back from spying out the land. This puts us approximately at the 18th day of the 4th month of the 2nd year, but there's some wiggle room there. They came to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran and Kadesh, and they brought back word to them and all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they said, "We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However," they're going against what God has said. "However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. Beside that, we saw the descendants of the Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan." But Caleb, he's important, right? Quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it." Then the men who had gone up said, "We are not able to go up against these people, for they are stronger than we are." So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out. They said, "The land with which we have gone to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of the Anak, who came from Nephilim, and we seemed ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. So a couple of things to note. This is the first time we've seen the Nephilim since Genesis 6. They were the giants and the mighty men in the land. But the other thing that we notice is that Caleb comes out and says, look, the land's ours. We know that God has given it to us. But the other 10 spies, Caleb and Joshua are going to speak positively about the journey that they had. But the other 10 spies give a bad report. They say, look, the land is brutal, it's tough, it's hard. Now, at this point, remember, they've left Egypt about 14 months ago. They've been hanging out at Sinai for the better part of a year. And at this point, they are so discouraged that they're disbelieving what God has said. Do you remember all the way back in Exodus chapter 4 when the people worshiped and they were rejoicing that God was going to rescue them from Egypt? But then by chapter 5 of Exodus, the people weren't even listening to the things of Moses because they were so dejected and so downtrodden in their spirit. So now they come into this land that God has promised to them, and their first response, at least 10 of the 12, their first response is, we can't go in, we can't take the land. So let's look at the people's response as a whole here in chapter 14, beginning in verse 1. Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. All the people of Israel grumbled against Moses. That should not surprise us. And they grumbled against Aaron. And the whole congregation said, would that we had died in Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. This is key. Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? My goodness, we've been seeing this now for for the last 14 months in their timeline. Should go back to Egypt? Let's just go back to Egypt. And they said to one another, let's choose a leader for ourselves to take us back to Egypt. So they're done with Moses. They're done with Aaron. This is referenced again for us in Nehemiah 9:17. Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly and all the congregation of the people of Israel. I love this, that they fell on their faces. That was always their response. It was always a response of humility before the Lord in the middle of these people complaining. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. This is a sign of grief. This tearing of clothes is a sign of grief. And so Joshua and Caleb are grieving over the people's, fear of trusting the Lord. They said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. That's contrary to what the other 10 had said. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord. Do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us, food for us. Their protection is removed from them, for the Lord is with us, so do not fear them. My goodness, I love that. The Lord is with us, so do not fear them. Then all the congregation set to stone them with stones, but the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of the meeting to all the people. So the people are about to stone Joshua and Caleb to death. They're about done with Moses and Aaron. This isn't the first time they were ready to kill Moses. They were ready to kill him just a couple of weeks out of Egypt when he made the bitter water sweet and he provided water for them out of the rock in those examples. But here they are. They're ready to destroy their leaders again. They're ready to appoint a cowardly leader who will take them back to Egypt and return them back to slavery. And it says the glory of the Lord appeared to them in the tent, and this kind of put an end to that. And so he stops them. And the Lord said to Moses, verse 11 of chapter 14, how long, listen to this, this is so important. How long will these people despise me? How long will they not believe in me in spite of the signs that I've done among them? So this is very, very important. You ask this question, or we should at least ask this question, is it that the people didn't believe that God existed? So of course they believe God existed, right? They've seen the plagues in Egypt. You're not going to forget that. They've walked through the middle of the Red Sea on dry ground. You're not going to forget that. They've watched the quail be stacked 3 feet high, a day's walk in any direction. They've watched at this point the manna be on the ground for the last 14 months. They've seen Mount Sinai covered in smoke and fire and trembling with the voice of God like the voice of a trumpet. They've seen the pillar of fire lead them by night and the pillar of cloud lead them by day. They've seen they've seen the face of Moses glowing when he came back from meeting with God. Do these people believe that God exists? Yes. So what does God mean when he says they despise me or they don't believe in me? What he's saying here is they have not put their confidence in him. They have not put their trust in him. This is really the very same thing that we see the Jews doing in the New Testament with Jesus. None of the Jews, if you had gone and polled any of the Jews walking around Jerusalem in the first century in those days of Jesus, and you said, hey, do you believe in Jesus? They'd go, oh yeah, Mary's son or Joseph's son, the carpenter, the guy who's doing the miracles, the guy who's healing people. Yeah, he raised the dead. Yeah, he fed the crowds. They believed in him, but there's something different about mentally believing in who God is, assenting to that, and then also putting your faith in him. At this point, these people had not put their faith in God. And that might remind us of what we've already looked at a couple of times in Hebrews 3 and 4, when it's talking about this group of people, and it said they were disobedient, they disbelieved, and they didn't have faith in him. And so they despise God, and the way that they're despising God in this is by not putting their faith in him. So if by chance you've stumbled across this podcast today, this video today, and you're thinking, well, yeah, I believe in God, or I believe in Jesus, or I believe that those guys exist and maybe they did some stuff. That's not the same thing as faith. That's not the same thing as putting your trust in Christ for salvation, putting your trust in God as creator. And so these people, they would have said, yeah, God met with Moses on the mountain. Yeah, God led us out of Egypt, but they despised him by not putting their faith and their trust in him. And so God says, how long will this people despise me? How long will they not believe in me in spite of all the signs that I have done among them? Verse 12, I will strike them with pestilence. I will disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier. But Moses said to the Lord, but then the Egyptians will hear of it, for you brought up this people by your might from among them, and they will tell all the inhabitants of this land. They heard that you, O Lord, are in the midst of this people. For you, O Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands over them to go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now, if you kill this people as one man, then the nations who have heard your fame will say, it is because the Lord was not able to bring people into the land that he swore to give them that he has killed them in the wilderness. Now, this is interesting. If you kill these people as one man, meaning if you just wipe out the nation in one fell swoop, then the people will say, oh, God was incapable of bringing them into the promised land. Moses is like kind of hinting here, maybe just kill them off slowly, maybe just kind of like purge the group a little bit, which is exactly what God's going to do over the next 38 years. But look at what Moses says in verse 17. Now, please let the power of the Lord be great as you have promised. The Lord is slow to anger. This is beautiful. Remember this from Exodus 34, 6 and 7. The Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression. He will by no means clear the guilty. I'm not asking you to clear the guilty in this. You will visit the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation. So this right here is how God reintroduced himself to Moses in Exodus 34 when God said, or Moses said, I want to see your glory. So Moses intercedes for the people in verse 19, and he says, please pardon the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your steadfast love, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt until now. Just as you've been forgiving these people over the last 14 months at this point, he says, continue to forgive them. He goes, I know they're stupid again. I know that they're rebellious again, but continue to forgive them. So then the Lord said, I have pardoned them according to your word. I love this. This is another picture of Moses interceding for the people, and God pardons the people because of the word of Moses. And so what's beautiful about that is that you and I are pardoned on the basis of the intercession of Jesus Christ. We've put our faith in Jesus, and now we are pardoned before the Lord because of Jesus. But he says this in verse 21, truly as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. That makes me think of Habakkuk 2:14 and Isaiah 6:3. None of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have yet put me to the test these 10 times and have not obeyed my voice, none of them shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers. None of those who despise me shall see it. They've put me to the test these 10 times. That is a reference to the different things that have happened over the last 14 months. I'm not counting it as 10 necessarily, but God is counting it as 10, so I'm not sure how that's breaking down. But he's like, look, these guys have put me to the test 10 times over the last 14 months. None of these guys are going to get to see the promised land. But, he says in verse 24, my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit, that's key, and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. Now, since the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valleys, turn tomorrow and set out for the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, how long will this wicked congregation grumble against me for the next 39 years? I have heard the grumblings of my people of Israel, which they grumble against me. Say to them, as I live, declares the Lord, what you have said in my hearing I will do. Your dead bodies will indeed fall in this wilderness. Of all of your number listed in the census, the Levites were not counted in the census, so they're not going to be receiving the same judgment. From 20 years old and upward, all who have grumbled against me, not one will come into the land that I swore to you, except for Caleb and Joshua. So All your little ones will get to come into the land. The people you said were going to die in the wilderness, I'll bring them into the land. But all of you, 20 years old and older, who have grumbled against me these last 14 months, none of you get to see the promised land. I'm done with you. You're going to die out in the wilderness, and I'll raise up a new generation. And he says this, your children, verse 33, shall be shepherds in the wilderness for 40 years. It's not 40 years from this point, it's 40 years total, time served included. So at this point, it's another 39 years. And they will suffer for your faithlessness until the last of your dead bodies lies in the wilderness. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, a year for each day, you will bear your iniquity for 40 years, and you will know my displeasure. And then immediately, look at this in verse 36, the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, who returned and made all the congregation grumble against him by bringing up the bad report, the men who brought up that bad report died by a plague before the Lord. So the 10 guys who are going, no, we can't take it, immediately die. Joshua and Caleb remain. Now, really quickly, let me sum up what happens. The people, Moses tells the people what's going to happen. You're going to die in the wilderness. And the people are like, oh man, we're sorry. Tomorrow we'll go into the land. We shouldn't have dishonored God. We shouldn't have despised God. Tomorrow we'll go in. And they decide to try to go into the promised land the next day. And if you keep reading, it says, they rose early in the next morning, went up on the heights of the hill, saying, here we are. We'll go to the place the Lord promised. We sinned yesterday. We're sorry. Moses said, why are you now transgressing the command of the Lord when you know that that will not succeed? Do not go up. The Lord is not with you. If you go up, you'll be struck down by your enemies. And so they go into the land. The Lord doesn't go with them. The Ark of the Covenant doesn't go with them. And they're turned away in the presence of their enemies, and they're struck down. And it says that they presumed upon themselves to go into the promised land after God had told them not to. And so again, we see these people rebelling against God. Moses brings them to the brink of the promised land. They go in, they see that the promised land is a good land, but they're talked out of it, and they grumble against the Lord. And as a result, they're going to spend the next 38 years dying in the wilderness, and it will be their kids that will go into the promised land in 39 years. But we will see that soon. So I will catch you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible through another section of Scripture where we come to know and understand God a little bit better. Look, if you're brand new to Simpler Bible, we have all sorts of resources available for you. Go to our website, simplerbible.com, and there you can find these videos, you can find our podcast, you can find links to our social media, and you can even find a blog post with additional scriptures if you want to go into a little bit more study than we had time to cover in this podcast and video today. We hope that this tool will be exactly that for you, a tool. Not something that replaces your daily walk with God, but something that enhances your daily walk with God and helps you to know and enjoy Him more. Thank you so much for being part of this, and we'll see you again tomorrow.